in the next 1 minute, we will kick off the next session of the multi-level action and urbanization pavilion. So I would suggest colleagues on the left side of our networking area to be a bit silent, and so that we can continue our process. Good. I think we have the speakers list for our session. This is the session entitled From Commitment to Delivery, Financing Multi-Level Action. It is organized by Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy and ICLE, Local Government for Sustainability, in this fantastic pavilion, which is hosting the urban community since the beginning of the week, and this will continue until the end of the week as well. According to our plan, we have 2 sessions. We will first be privileged to be the first audience of an important report that is just released today by World Bank. And one of the authors actually will be taking us through this report. We will also enjoy, or we are expecting the presidency, COP28 presidency also to join us to share their updates on their recent, one of the impressive initiatives, so many initiatives of this week, and one of the most powerful one, because we were together with that. There are so many initiatives, but this is the one on multi-level action. Asif Nawaz Shah, the stakeholder engagement coordinator of the presidency, would be joining us. And after the first introductory remarks, we will hear from Professor Jenny Birch, the coordinator of the SDSN, Global Commission for Urban SDG, as the first icebreaker to respond to what was being discussed. Then we will have the second part of our session. We will hear from subnational leaders, and a very, very important partner, NDC Partnership, who has been involved with us to continue this commenting on what they have heard and how they would like to take it forward. Presumably, this session was supposed to be moderated by our partner, Global Covenant of Mayors. As far as I know, no one is volunteering. Kathy, are you the one to moderate, or I don't want to put you on fire? I can handle it from here. Okay. Since ICLE has also been a founding partner of the Global Covenant of Mayors, on their behalf, I'm ready to welcome you. My name is Yunus Arikan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE. So just without further ado, invite all our speakers first on stage. And Asif will take time, I guess. Therefore, I suggest we start with Stefan. You are free to present your report from here or from the chair, but I'd like to give the floor to you first for your report. Good, perfect.
So thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. It's really a pleasure to be here on this very important topic. So I'll just start with introducing a little bit what at the World Bank we've been trying to do on this topic, and then I'll shift to this report that really focuses on the role of cities in the context of NDCs and long-term strategies. So first, and maybe you know all of that, but the transition of cities is one of the key transition that we have identified in our climate change action plan. And so it's one of the dimensions in which we have special attention, where we have indicators to check that we're doing the work. And one other thing in the context of this climate change action plan that has played a key role at the World Bank is our new diagnostics at the country level, the country climate and development reports. So we have published 42 CCDRs covering 42 countries so far in the last 2 years. And the idea is really to look at how countries can achieve their development goals, managing climate change impacts, and making it consistent with their commitments and action on emission reductions. So I like to say they are not climate reports, they are really development reports. The question is, how do you achieve your development goals with climate change affecting that? And you will see in those CCDRs that the role of cities is very present. But you'll also see how challenging it is. And I think it's very connected to our discussion because it cuts across everything. And so in reports, which are very often organized per sector, it's always extremely complicated to make all of the pieces fit. And it's really interesting to see like the challenges we have in our reports are really the challenges we have in the real life, which I think is a good sign. So those analytical products, the report I will present and what we're doing at the country level are really the first block of our support to countries in managing their urbanization process. Then we do more like technical assistance work where we provide a service to governments or cities to help them on specific cases. And then, of course, the last part of that is the operationalization, implementation of projects or policy change with the financing coming from the World Bank. So we're trying to have the full chain from the analytics about what are the opportunities to the actual support to the implementation of those opportunities. I want to flag the role of specific pots of money that we use to do that and who are supporting us when we do this type of report. One is the City Resilience Program, which is a program focused on how cities can develop while reducing risks. And that has been also trying to support the provision of finance at the city level. And the other one is the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, which is very, very focused on the financing question and the mobilization of resources for cities. So that's the type of resources that we use, especially on the analytics and technical assistance. So briefly on the substance, I don't think I need to convince you that this is an important topic, I guess. Maybe what I can say is how we convince others, because not everyone starts there. And the way we have been framing this is, especially in our diagnostics or CCDRs, we try to prioritize our recommendations based on two dimensions. One dimension is how much can we align development and climate? So basically, what are the development benefits from doing something which can be labeled climate action? And the second dimension is the urgency of action. So with our countries being, in many cases, very limited in capacity, in finance, governance, institutions. Basically, our point is if something can be delayed, let's delay it and focus on what is really, really urgent. And this framing has really helped us because on the urbanization part, because in terms of synergies, cities really like jump at you, right? That's all of the question around resilience. I mean, if you have any city in a tropical climate, have this very poor neighborhood flooded every year with very bad consequences on health, on access to job, access to services. So you can tell like climate action is first and foremost about making lives better. And we have the same discussion on the mitigation agenda, like electric mobility, soft mobility, public transit, all of the things you can put a stamp, climate stamp on it, but it improves people's lives today in cities and it makes them more productive, more attractive. So we have this very strong alignment in the urban context between climate and development. And in terms of urgency, of course, I mean, in places like India or in Sub-Saharan Africa, cities are being developed now. And basically, if we miss that boat, well, and if you end up with Atlanta, just good luck to just transform that once you have it, right? So we are really making the case that if there are a few things that cannot be delayed, cities is really one of those sectors where you really cannot wait. So to support the how, we have this report that we are just launching. And I think it starts with this needs and this urgency for action in cities. But I think the key focus of this report is try to understand why, when you look at NDCs and long-term strategies, you don't always find cities as you would expect them to be. And we really feel like that's a missed opportunity because those NDCs and long-term strategies are key places where the right people are around the table to do the coordination, and the coordination is the key challenge in the urban environment. And so one of the questions the report asks is how can we use those processes and NDCs and LTSs to do better on that. And so it discusses the coordination in the vertical one, like with governments and with like the national level entities like business association, civil society, and so on, but also across sectors. And this, frankly, be doing a lot of CCDRs is always the key challenge, right? The energy and transport and building, and in building you have the residential, and it's not the same people managing the commercial. So how to help use these platforms to just do this type of coordination. So it's very difficult to summarize a report about the how. I don't know if you have been in my position, but when you have these reports with big numbers and so on, super easy. The how is always super granular. It's always a lot of things. So we had very precise recommendations about how that can be done and how we can jump on the boat of those LTSs, especially to bring more of the urban thing. It's a lot about collaboration. It's a lot about identifying opportunities with this very positive lens, and it's a lot about the financing and how those processes can bring financing. So I don't want to be much longer, but just to suggest that really the key approach on those issues is not so much an approach on looking at what's possible and what's desirable. It's an approach about the barriers. And just I think we all agree on what we're trying to achieve. The key question is, what is blocking us? And just ranking those barriers with the ones that we can really tackle tomorrow, and just start there. And since we want to talk about financing, especially in the use of concessional finance, if you have a barrier and you use concessional finance to overcome the barrier, but when you're done with your project, the barrier is still there, it's not a good use of concessional finance. The good use of concessional finance is after you have used it, the barriers is gone, or at least has been reduced. And that's how we're trying to prioritize the use of concessional finance, looking at the barriers and asking our teams to explain at the end of the project, what is the barrier that you have reduced for the next person coming after you trying to do the same thing. So that's one of the recommendations we give our teams. So I'll just stop here, but I'm really looking forward to the discussion and seeing how this new initiative CHAMP can just interact with what we have been doing and support this action. And I think the key thing, especially when you're dealing with low capacity environments, people are a bit overwhelmed by the number of initiatives. So I think it's very important that we have a common narrative and be able to explain how the different pieces work together, and that people don't feel like you have like competing. Still not me, right?
There are so many pavilions, and unfortunately,
okay,
it's not related to us. Yeah. Okay.
So I'll stop here anyway. But just calling on this new initiative to be very focused on the barriers, and very happy to have this discussion about when we talk to the people in the cities doing the work, how we explain how we work together and how we build on each other and not work in parallel tracks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. And especially, yes, a big applause. I think, Stefan, maybe you can come here and stay for a while, at least in the first part, because no. Ginny will also come. I'd like to invite Ginny there, because now, first of all, I think the change of order was perfect, because you put the problem and we believe the solution is the CHAMP. And I'm very happy both of our speakers have arrived and our moderator also has arrived. And actually our moderator brought the speaker. So it was a perfect combination. I'd like to give the floor now to Andy Deacon for on behalf of GCOM, the partner of this session, and the core partner also of the co-host of the pavilion, to introduce our next speaker. He's also here, and moderate the rest of the session. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. Apologies for being a few minutes late. Just a lot of preparation under work, and a blatant plug for the Urban Ministerial taking place tomorrow. We hope all of you here will be able to be represented there. Thank you to Gino, Unison colleagues also for helping to organize the whole of the local government and municipal authority constituency in order for us to be fully represented in the right way there. And fantastic that 64 national governments have committed so far. That's 64. I feel like a bingo caller now. And you may also have seen on your way in this morning, then the presidency initiatives are currently then displayed on the side of a building in the way in. And I texted a colleague from Bloomberg Philanthropies in New York with a message that said, OMG, they put our initiative on the side of a building. So that doesn't happen very often in this kind of world. We're used to moving in corridors and carefully wordsmithing pieces of paper. So enormous credit to the COP28 presidency, who we'll come to in a second. See, we've done this before. I big him up and then he knocks it out of the park. It's perfect. Then for taking that initiative on all of the COP presidency initiatives, but obviously in particular on CHAMP. It's only the beginning, and Stefan, your work and those of other agencies is very important. The one thing I will say, and then I will hand over to the presidency, is that CHAMP exists as a document, so you can read all of the 6 commitments, but within the PDF version of the document that is on the LGMA, no, is on the presidency website, and will go on the globalcovenantofmayors.org website as well later on today. Within the document, there is an explainer that talks about how CHAMP relates to a number of other existing initiatives and programs. So you're quite right. We don't want this to appear as another pledge on top of 100 other pledges that mayors and those in the room are always being asked to sign on to. We're very clear that there was a gap, and it's designed to fill a particular gap, and that's to link local to regional to national to global. And that really is where the gap is. And thank you, Stefan, for leading this work on behalf of the World Bank, that's then also trying to make that link not only on the policy frameworks, but also on the financing. So I've said far too much there. It's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Asif Shah from the COP28 presidency team, to say a little bit more about CHAMP and the intent of that and other COP presidency initiatives. Asif, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Hello. Yes, I'll have to lean over a little bit because I don't think this podium was built for me. So first of all, thank you very much to all of the LGMA partners who have made this pavilion the global stage for cities and regions at COP28. And thank you to GCOM for inviting me here today. To give you a brief sort of history of where this new coalition originated. Over the course of the past year, we've been speaking with a lot of the partners that are here in this room today, and others, to understand what can COP28 add to the current ecosystem of initiatives or programs that aim to support subnational climate action. And the recurring theme that came out of those conversations was, well, cities and regions and municipalities are taking action, they're making commitments, they're committed to advancing climate action for their communities, their residents, their constituents. But there's often a disconnect between what's happening on the ground and what is the commitments that are being taken at the national, regional, global level. And so that's really that gap where CHAMP was designed to fit in. And like Andy said, it's not meant to be duplicative of the many wonderful initiatives that are already occupying this space and that have been empowering local actors to take ambitious climate action over the last almost decade since the Paris Agreement came into force, was agreed in 2015, but to connect them and provide them with a stronger foundation from which to deliver greater results for the cities and regions that they work with. And so thank you, first of all, to Stefan for the presentation. I missed the beginning of it, but I got most of it. And I think one of the key drivers of JAMP was the need to make sure that global climate finance translates into local climate action. And that is something that we are going to be looking to, obviously, the multilateral development banks, the other development financing institutions, our partners within the LGMA, national governments who have endorsed JAMP to really push in this next phase of climate action as we move from commitment to implementation as something that is a priority. And I think that's highlighted in the way JAMP is framed, particularly with that roadmap and that timeline to 2025 and the next round of NDC submissions by COP30. How can we use the momentum that has been built by the 64 countries and counting, and we're looking forward to the possibility of more countries joining this movement, this coalition, tomorrow at the ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change, which will be taking place in the Al Ghafat plenary 2 in the Blue Zone here at UNFCCC, starting at 9:30 a.m. So please attend and tell everyone who you know who is here who might want to come. So how can we use this momentum to actually make a difference, demonstrate that additionality, demonstrate the power of collaboration between all levels of government, between all sectors of society, in achieving the aims of the Paris Agreement. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to discussing this further with all of you and to hopefully all the great work that lies ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So that's all levels of government and all sectors of society to be entirely transformed within the next 2 years. So we've set ourselves a fairly ambitious challenge there, at least for the negotiating parties that have so far endorsed the JAMP initiative. So to tell us a little bit more about one component of that, I want to turn to a good friend, trusted advisor, but also world-leading expert, in particular on the finance for some of this activity, Professor Jeannie Birch, who's engaged in both the Commission on funding for SDGs, alongside Jeffrey Sachs, a number of mayors and others. I'm very grateful for your support and sage advice in helping to drive that activity forward. But who has long been a champion of efforts to transform climate finance activity at those multiple levels. So to build both on the comments that Stefan has made, maybe also on top of what Asifa said about the governance role of this new initiative, then let me hand over to you for a few minutes to give us some remarks. Jeannie.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that very gracious introduction. This is a moment of celebration. This is really incredible. This is a moment. Many of us have been in this world for quite a number of years and never have we seen this convergence of success before. And we've been fighting for it. I cannot tell you, Asif, it's just unbelievable what you've accomplished with all the city networks and so forth. I'd like to think about and talk about some of the things that we've been working on and why this is so important this very moment is. If we look at the World Bank, it's been very, very important, formed after World War II by the member states when cities weren't very important. And it had a mandate to deal with poverty and so forth. It never really thought very much about cities until about, and I hope I'm accurate here, about 2009, a very important World Development Report came out, which was called the Reshaping Economic Geography, and began to look at the spatial implications of economic development. And we come forward now to what Stefan has just told us about in the report that's just been done on the power of cities. And what's really remarkable about this study, and another one that joins it called Thrive, done by the World Bank, is its attention to the spatial development of cities. Many experts that run banks aren't used to thinking about places as spaces. And what's so important about this is not only are they thinking about the spatial dimensions, but they're thinking about the fact that not all places are the same. The geography and context make cities very different, and therefore their needs for climate change are very different. And why is it so? Why am I rushing about talking about the spatial dimension? It's not because I'm a city planner, but it's because when you think about the fact that when you're talking about climate change, it's all happening in space. And we could go, by the way, to the SDGs and look at the goal 11. In one of the targets, there was a very controversial indicator that was put out for target 3, which was about planning, which said we ought to look at the rate of land consumption against the rate of population. It was a very controversial sort of indicator. And everybody said, nobody can do it. No one's going to measure it. But why is this important? It is important because we're looking at what happens with rapid urbanization that is now occurring, particularly in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, and it's happening in space. And what does this mean for climate? It means we're going to have sprawl, we're going to have more energy consumption, we're going to have to deal with transportation, deal with housing and so forth in very different ways. And so we have this recognition in the knowledge area about space and place. We now have, through CHAMP, the recognition that subnational indicators, subnational government activities need to be put into the NDCs. And therefore, I mean, that just never happened before, thinking about the subnational piece, the spatial piece. And therefore, it's not too far a leap to say, well, if we're going to talk about space and place and subnational, of course, we're talking about governments. Of course, we're talking about the relationship in governmental levels, and they're doing the right things at the right level. That's called subsidiarity, which we've all said is very important to support. But we're also talking about bringing funding to the places where it's most important. And that's why this work is so incredible. And we must attribute this to the knowledge that is being put forth by places like the World Bank, OECD, research institutes such as the Barcelona one, which I just found about today, the city networks who have been putting forth the ideas about this, and the activities that are now being joined together under CHAMP and under loss and damages, which has a reference to subnational activities as well. So let me tell you quickly about this effort that we put together with the help of the city networks to think about how we can bring more attention to financing urban SDGs, urban finance for the SDGs, but particularly for climate change. This came out of various conferences, everything from Habitat 3 to the UNFCCC conferences over the years, to say we need to bring together all the voices so that we can think about the sources of funding and what needs to be done to change them. So this commission, which was launched last year in Paris by Mary Hidalgo, who is co-chair of the commission, and Eduardo Paes, who is co-chair, and Jeff Sachs, was launched at the sidelines of the Macron conference. And it was almost a duplicate, I have to remind you, in 2015, of what happened at Paris conference. 200 mayors stood on the steps at the Hotel de Ville in Paris and said, think of us when we're talking about the Paris Agreement. Well, we weren't thought of in the Paris Agreement particularly, but now we are. And again, this commission has 3 task forces, one looking at multilateral development banks, a very important source of funding, and we are hearing some hopeful things in that direction. Looking at whether we can enhance or create new funds that'll be totally dedicated to city climate action plans and their implementation. And lastly, how we can bring in the private sector. In addition to that, there are 3 other subcommittees or task forces that are working on advocacy, working on the balance between mitigation and adaptation, led by Andy here. As we all know, in cities, these things aren't separate. They're often intersecting, and we have to think of it that way and think about how we can fund both adaptation and mitigation. And lastly, an advocacy campaign. And that's where we need all of you to raise your voices, because it's so important to convene and speak in one voice, which we've given the opportunity to do by CHAMP, by the research that's being done by our various entities like the World Bank, It's giving us voice, providing frameworks for diagnostics so that we can go forward with the ideas of how we get the money to the cities. So congratulations to you both.
Thanks, Jenny. Fantastic words, and we wish the Commission the very best of success in driving forward those outcomes. And there are a number of commissioners with us on the platform or in the audience, including Gino, Inga, and others who are supporting colleagues who are there. And so good to be engaging in these public debates and to hear from as wide a constituency as possible. We're trying to be creative and we're moving at pace, which also means that I'm going to hand over. Thank you very much, all of you. To Gino for the next segment of the discussion, where we're here from both national representatives as well as some municipal representatives around the role that they've been thinking about and are playing in delivering on all of this. Gino, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gino van Beek, and I'm the Secretary General of ICLE, and it's a pleasure to take over and step in after Andy in this session. Yes, I would like to call upon our panelists here to join me here at the stage. Mr. and Dr. Lutz Morgenstern, please. Mr. Alain Ramirez, please. Madam Alison Gilliard, please. Mr. Ladislas Ngendahimana and Amanda McKee. Are you here, Amanda? Yeah, okay. Very good. Please come 1 foot. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, yes, we are very encouraged by the fact that today 64 countries have indeed already endorsed CHAMP. In that sense, we are very much looking forward to this particular panel, because we will hear from some of the national governments who have endorsed CHAMP. We will hear from local or national associations of local governments who are supporting, obviously, CHAMP. And we will hear also from the NDC partnership that is with us, as well as from the European Committee of the Regions also supporting CHAMP. Let me just say, when we started to brainstorm about what CHAMP could be about, with all of the colleagues here, for us it was particularly important to look at this momentum that is now going to start, namely a re-enhancing and updating of the NDCs of the nations. And as you well know, the NDCs is the mechanism for each of the nations to contribute to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. We know through the global stocktake that the NDCs that are on the table right now are not sufficient to keep us on the 1.5 track. So obviously the period that is now, as inscribed in the Paris Agreement, to revise and enhance those NDCs from after Dubai until the COP25 in COP30 in 2025 in Brazil is an extremely important period. And so the nations that have been endorsing now CHAMP will or are committing to enter into a process with their national and local governments within, of course, their own national institution and framework that they have, to discuss now with local and regional governments which programs, which projects can actually help to raise the national targets that they have put on the table. So in that sense, I would like to welcome very much Dr. Lutz Morgenstern, who is the head of division of the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, the BMWK, in Germany. And Germany is one of the endorsers of CHAMP. So, Mr. Morgenstern, I would like to start with you and ask you immediately as to why have you, representing Germany, endorsed CHAMP? How do you think you will be able to implement CHAMP in Germany with the local and regional governments there? Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Gino. Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I wanted to briefly touch upon 2 points and then also answering your questions. So first one, the need for collaboration. I think that was highlighted from you and your study, and we all know that. But when preparing for that meeting here, I looked into really interesting figures that I wanted to bring up, because it's a study by the Coalition for Urban Transition, and that study said that 1/3 of emissions of cities, according to these studies, can be actually influenced by the cities themselves. Another third can be influenced by the national government, but then the third part of these emissions can only be tackled by multi-level cooperation. So this is why we, as the German government, we thought that it's really important that the COP presidency brought up and pushed, and many others pushed and suggested the CHAMP declaration, and we are really proud to also sign and be member of the CHAMP declaration. I also have to say, I don't know who invented the acronym, but it's really an excellent acronym. It's so much easier to keep in mind than most of the other acronyms that are used here in these negotiations. So this as well is really excellent. And then very briefly, maybe I would like to underscore that Germany was always very active in the field of supporting subnational climate action. For instance, on domestic level, we have invested more than 1.5 billion euros via our national climate initiative, but also on the international level with our IKI. We have a project portfolio of more than 200 million euros. And I have 3 examples here, but I will only bring up one because time is running and there are so many other panelists. But one initiative I want to mention that was we set up the City Climate Finance Gap Fund that was already briefly mentioned. And I think this is really because Stefan, you also talked about the barriers, and there is a massive barrier in terms of the financing of climate subnational climate action. And this fund, this year it has already achieved its funding goal of 100 million euros, with funding from Germany and also from Luxembourg. So thanks to our Luxembourg colleagues. And the GAF fund is dedicated to support cities in the very early and high-risk stages of project development, because that was one of the findings, that in that stage, it's really hard for cities actually to receive any funding. And one concrete example it's from Bogota, Colombia. Their children will now go to school in electric buses soon to the support of GAP Fund. And that for me is really a very convincing example that also highlights what you said. Climate action is always, it improves actually the normal life of the normal people. And this is why it's so important. So thank you actually for this initiative and the CHAMP declaration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morgenstein. Thank you. Let me turn now to the South and Mr. Alan Ramirez, who is with us here, is the Deputy Head of Delegation of the Dominican Republic and Technical Director of the National Council for Climate Change and Clean Development Mechanisms. So, Mr. Ramirez, your country is also endorsing CHAMP. Please share with us that good news, but also as to why and how you want to implement that further.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to express gratitude for the invitation, which I believe is a recognition of the work that we have done in recent years regarding this initiative. For better understanding on the role of that long name council, probably I need to brief you on the why the Dominican Republic opted for a singular manner of governance for the climate issues in the country, as opposed to what happened in most of the countries member of the UNFCCC. The Dominican Republic, instead of assigning the responsibility of designing and implementing the policies regarding climate change to a particular ministry, opted for the creation of an umbrella organization led and shared by the President of the Dominican Republic, and integrating all ministers and relevant organizations that are part of what we call the climate change agenda. The council was created 15 years ago with the mandate to coordinate all actions and activities related to the climate change policies at the national and regional and international level. The Dominican Republic presented its revised and updated NDC on December 2020, resulting from a full-fledged consultation with all relevant stakeholders, including local governments and civil society. The NDC identified 46 mitigation measures and 37 adaptation options with an initial estimation of investment of 18 billion US dollars, 50% of which were allocated for adaptation, and the other 50%, of course, for mitigation actions. We also included a mitigation goal of 27% reduction of our greenhouse gases emissions under the business as usual scenario. 25% of the required investment is not conditioned to foreign either reimbursable or non-reimbursable cooperation, which implies the need to develop capacities for the identification and canalization of financial resources. Hence, our working experience with ICLEI has focused on the development of bankable investment portfolios, which include water and sanitation services, infrastructure, housing, livelihood, diversification, and shelters, with a city-scale approach and a short midterm financial strategy. Finally, because of the limitation on time, we have developed a series of initiatives, including workshops on project identification and canalization of financial resources, as well as funding courses for project implementation and capacity building for project development. Another thing that we did, that we have done in the past, is to, within a pilot project that was financed by the French corporation, we sit with a group of 5 local governments to intervene, to try to be part of the planning sessions regarding their own constituencies and their own territories, to help them develop their development plans and for the best use of the soil and the territory. So we included adaptation and mitigation into their planification or planning of at the local or regional level. Having said all that, I think that the bridge has been identified, and we should build on this experience to take advantage of this new initiative, as we believe that CHAMPS will help us close the gap of the limited resources and the number of necessities that are required for the implementation of our NDC and our accomplishment of our midterm and long-term goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Indeed, I think for the Dominican Republic, as well as for many other countries, they can use the NDCs and the enhancement of the NDCs through CHAMP now, in particularly also by introducing and including particular programs, the ones you were referring to, 47 on mitigation and 37 on 46 on mitigation, 37 on adaptation. So very much that is taking place at the local regional level, and you put not only the measures in terms of what am I achieving in terms of reductions or in adaptation objectives, but also the price ticket, and then you can discuss here at these COPs in the future the possibilities and opportunities for seeking and receiving investments for that. So thank you very much for that. I would like to now move to representatives of local and regional governments, at the one hand in Europe and at the other hand in Rwanda, Africa. First, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Alison Gilliland, councillor in Dublin, Ireland, and member of the European Committee of the Regions. The European Committee of the Regions is the institution in Europe that represents at European level with the other European institutions, local and regional governments. Please, Madam.
Thank you very much, and lovely to be here. And as you said, the European Committee of the Regions represents about 1 million political leaders across the European Union, from local municipality right up to regional. And our European institutions have a responsibility under legislation to consult with us when any of their opinions, their directives, their legislations impacts on local level. And that's 70% of everything. And we have a very strong connection with them, very strong dialogue. We anticipate some of the directives coming, some of the legislation and present to them. And equally, it's a very much a mutual back and forward. We link very much into ECLA through Eunice here. And I really, really want to compliment all the various different organizations at local and municipal level. It's been a long, long fight, a long struggle. And I think even for ourselves to come together under one single voice. And when you think that's global north, global south, east and west, different contexts, different climate impacts, but to have that one voice. And I think, as Jeannie said, to have that voice recognized, today is a really, really good day. And I want to compliment everyone, and including yourself, Mr. Sherry, for being part of that process and actually getting it on paper. Cities, why cities? Most people live in them. They have most emissions, even though they take up only 3% of the land on Earth. But as local representatives, we are closest to the people that are both suffering the climate impact, but also the peoples who have to shift their businesses, their lifestyles, the way they live, they move about. We know their vulnerabilities. We know the context. There's different risks in different regions, but also as a local politician, they know where to reach us. And I think that relationship that we have that is so close, it's our responsibility. And for us, climate action is a public service. And what Champ says to me also is that this crisis is now starting to look with a very keen eye on implementation, because that's where local cities, regions, local authorities are frontline implementing and frontline, sadly, cleaning up a lot of the time after extreme weather events. So it's great that the finance has been identified, that there is a gap there. I think we still have to identify how to get it down. A lot of local representatives like myself will partner with private enterprise. We have to. They have the expertise, whether that be in energy transition, in mobility, and it's wonderful that we can work, but we still need the finance. We partner with small, medium, large enterprise. We also are solution facilitators. For example, in Dublin, we have real difficulties like everybody else. So the perspective or the approach that we use is we put a call out to private enterprise to work with us in a solution capacity. We don't want your tailor-made solution. We want you to work with us and work with our communities, work with academia, so together we can come up with a solution, we can evaluate it, and we also work with our citizens so they are part of that process. And that's really important to us. From a cost perspective, while we're always asking for money of our national leaders, as well as our, in my case, European Union, we also want that technical expertise. And I think just want to highlight something at the European Committee of the Regions perspective is the Green Deal going local, where we amongst ourselves share and learn, because we don't have time to duplicate, but we do have time to adapt solutions that are already there. And for anyone that's interested, we have a brilliant portal that you will actually find loads of those examples in. And my final comment on spending and money. Long term, we will save money. And I'm particularly thinking of health and well-being, where we have cleaner air, where we have fresher, more local food, where we have people that can move around in a 15-minute city to all their facilities, their employment, their well-being will improve. And therefore, the costs that we are now spending a lot of the time on health to remediate will be mitigated. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gilliland. Thank you very much. So from Europe to Africa, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ladislas Ngenda Himana, the Secretary General of the National Association of Local Governments in Rwanda. Please, Ladislas.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this event and the COP presidency for having given the floor to the GMA, considering the interventions and the setup of this COP. It is special in nature. I need first of all to thank the organizers for this. RARIGA, the Rwanda Association of Local Government Authorities, is now 20 years old, and our mandate is about capacity building of the members, advocacy, and representation. When it goes to CHAMP, first of all, this is a very good initiative because it is result-oriented, and this shall guide the intervention. The Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships should apply both domestically, multilaterally, and internationally. We should not consider CHAMP within the government itself. CHAMP should be perceived both within and outside, involving also the different development partners. In Rwanda, we have the decentralization policy, which clearly defines the responsibilities of the local government and the central government, and particularly local government is responsible for implementation of government programs. And the specificity of the revision of NDCs is that we needed to break down under the CHAMP initiative to see what can be implemented locally, to cost it locally, and to implement it locally. This should be delivered through CHAMP. Looking at the perspective of the COP over the last 4 to 5 years, I think at the local level, there is 2 requests to do or 2 imperatives to deliver on. We need, first of all, to assign responsibilities, but also we need to assign resources. Because the difference comes when you assign responsibilities to local governments and we don't assign resources to implement the responsibilities. And this mismatch sometimes leads to some operational failures. I have been participating to different COPs for the last 4 to 5 COPs. The COP 25, which was in Madrid, looked like the COP for the orientation. After that, it was COP 26. It was in Glasgow. At least here, we had 2 meaningful outcomes. One, there was a resolve to keep 1.5 degrees alive, but also there was the climate pact which was adopted in Glasgow. And the one failure we had in Glasgow at COP was the failure to agree on the loss and the damage fund. This was the biggest failure of COP25 in Glasgow. We had the hope at Sharm el-Sheikh last year in Egypt about this loss and damage fund. This was really the COP for hope. It promised, but it did not deliver on that. So the onset of this COP28 is that the loss and damage fund has delivered. And the LGMA, the local government and the municipal authorities are taking flow. These are the two meaningful outcomes of this COP. And from the local government perspective, it would be meaningful if CHAMP and multi-level collaboration or multi-level action are translated into outcomes of this COP. Particularly looking at the operations, local government is about action, NDCs are about action, but we need funds, we need finance. So from this scope and through NDC's revision and the CHAMP, let's aim at three things. Participatory revision of NDCs through multi-level collaboration. Let's define clearly the assignments of local governments and the subnational governments. Let's assign responsibilities and let's have direct access to finance for implementation. This, if it is delivered, these three things, if we can deliver on these three things, as local governments, we shall work closely with the government and the communities, and we shall deliver on the Pact for the Future, which is about people, planet, and the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anjandahi Mana. Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to our partner here from the NDC Partnership Support Unit, to Amanda McKee, who is the Director for Knowledge and Learning. And the NDC Partnership Support Unit is a unit that helps to implement the partnership at NDC level amongst countries. And of course, we are looking forward to hear from you, Amanda, how you think in terms of the CHAMP now, how the architecture in the NDC partnership support that is being provided, how is that going to be able to be enhanced as well through CHAMP? So welcome.
Great. Well, thank you. And super excited to be moving this forward together with a number of NDC partnership members, with the COP presidency. So really the partnership is a coalition. We bring together over 200 members. That includes countries and institutions. And our plan is to see how we can really leverage that mechanism to bring support to the subnational level. So through the partnership, countries identify their requests for support. We help to circulate those amongst the members and put together a targeted package, a tailored package of technical assistance and finance to help them move forward their climate commitments. So I wanted to, in talking about how we could support, actually talk about some of the requests that we're already receiving, because I think it's a really nice connection. We're not starting from nowhere. We, at the partnership, of the approximately 3,000 individual requests we've received from close to 90 countries, 161, that's a big number on its own, but small in comparison to the bulk, is related to subnational finance specifically. So there's a link there. And these requests are coming from 36 countries. So we have 36 countries in the partnership who are already thinking about this as part of their implementation plan. So that's really important because that's a hook that we have. The next thing I wanted to share is that we also know a little bit about the type of support that they're requesting. So when we look at the national level in terms of requests for support, through the partnership, it's often a lot of technical assistance requests. At the subnational level, it's actually much more heavily skewed towards projects. Cities are thinking about how to move things forward, how to implement it. We see that as well in terms of the sectors that are being requested. And so similar sectors that you would expect at the subnational level that are often less reflected at the national level, but waste, water, also circular economy is a huge one that we see cities thinking about. So I mention this because there's a big opportunity for us to build on the conversation that's already taking place at the national level and see how we can support through focal points within ministries of environment, ministries of finance, to really bridge to the subnational level and see how we can bring some of this support down. The last thing that I wanted to mention, and I started by talking about how excited we are to be working with some of these partners. We have, I forget the exact number, I think it's 180, 190 partners who are engaged in the NDC partnership in one way or another, providing support. 146 of them are providing support on at least one request that's related to subnational finance. So that's actually quite a big pool of partners for us to tap into. A lot of the partners are in the room today. The World Bank is one. ICLEI is one of the biggest, but Germany as well is actually the biggest partner who's supporting on subnational action. And so I mention that because, again, we have the mechanism, we have the partners and the willingness. And so I think through CHAMP, or I hope through CHAMP, that we can actually help to accelerate some of this support to the subnational level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam McKee. And I think what you just said is very, very important. When we analyzed the NDCs that currently exist on their urban components, it was indeed very interesting to see, just to say 25% of the current NDCs have urban components, but some nations have really very strong subnational programs and projects. Give you an example. In India, the Indian NDC has a project for the construction of a solar energy-led airport. It is calculated what the emissions would be, the savings, the funding needed, the funding that India government can put in there. Just as an example, other countries have followed in similar ways. Korea or China, Japan, with really programs for cities to become far more energy efficient, to become far more smarter, with clear indicators on what the benefits in terms of mitigation or adaptation could be. So thank you very much, and definitely this is going to be an exciting time to open up that new dimension. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Asif for some final concluding words of any comments of what you have heard here, and perhaps also the link to the Urban Ministerial tomorrow once again. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. I promise this is the last you will be hearing from me today. So first of all, thank you so much to all the partners that are on this panel. I think on some level, this can be counted as the first example of a CHAMP dialogue, because I think one thing we want to really highlight is that final commitment under CHAMP is about convening to share best practices, challenges, lessons learned, and how to apply those learnings from one context to another, obviously in line with national circumstances and regulations. And that's something we're hoping to do. Kick off both tomorrow at the ministerial, like Gino said, highlight what multi-level climate action means in different contexts. And we're very happy to share that we're expecting over 40 countries to attend the ministerial and participate along with subnational leaders, financing institutions and others. And then over the course of 2024, where we hope to convene the first high-level dialogue on multi-level climate action under the CHAMP coalition. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for the support for CHAMP, and look forward to working with all of you to bring it further to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we come to the conclusion of this session. I would like to thank all panelists and speakers, and invite also all panelists and speakers, Jenny, Stefan, to join us here, Asif, for a picture, family picture.